Right, well, it's 3 minutes past, so I think we will get started. So before we start, I just want to apologise if anyone can hear the heavens opening above me, because you joined me from a very grey and wet part of Lincolnshire at the moment. And as you can hear, my attic office, unfortunately, is being beaten on by the rain. So I do apologise if that's the case. But let's get the presentation up and running, and we'll get going. Right. Okay. So as you probably all know, my name is Alastair Meiklejon. I'm Senior Valuer and Wristwatch Specialist here at Dallas. And today, thankfully, I'm joined by my very good friend, Ben Hanley. How are you today?
Hi, guys. Ben? How are you doing?
Good, good. So, Ben, what is the area that you specialize in, just so people know?
I have a reasonably broad range, but it's mainly post-war contemporary, but I also do impressionist and basically anything from the 20th century upwards, generally speaking.
Fantastic. So today, as most of you who will have read the synopsis about what we are going to do today, is about talking to your clients and some of the reasons why they may have issues with the valuations that they actually have. So first of all, we'll just have a quick look at why have a valuation and what is the actual necessity for having that valuation. So valuations are critical to every client and every broker to establish the true value of the insured items. And I'm sure as brokers and insurers, you know how important it is to make sure your clients are correctly covered. That's the relationship that you have with your clients, and whether or not you then visit them and you actually talk about this, or whether or not you haven't been to see them, but you know that they need something to be done in terms of evaluation, it's never a bad thing to get done. So the value is not based on what the insured paid or what the insured thinks it's worth, or what the insured thinks it's worth now, which you would be massively surprised, because I mean, as I'm sure Ben will tell you, in terms of paintings, people are still out there actually insuring things for what they paid for them, aren't they, Ben?
It's a nonsense. I mean, I can only speak for the sort of the art area, but you get bubbles within the art market whereby certain artists go up. I mean, at an extreme level, within every 2 to 3 months, you can see a price hikes in certain artists, but certainly every year. So I mean, if you even index link your original price, you could potentially be massively under or over insured. In fact, I mean, it works both ways. So I mean, it's a nonsense approach. You have to keep on top of the market values. The current retail replacement values.
Absolutely. So should you find you're underinsured, you won't be able to recoup the loss. And you would be surprised how many people have actually experienced this. And with watches, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen it whereby somebody said, well, you know, I bought it, and I was looking through a Rolex price list the other day from 2005, and you could buy a Rolex Submariner for £2,700. And people who, this is the thing. I mean, people would actually think, oh, that's not that long ago, is it? And you think, okay, well, I've got it insured, you know, it's been index linked and it's gone up.
Now, what would it cost to a shot to
18 grand, something around there? It's hilarious. It's almost laughable, but that's the problem, and that's what we're seeing just on an everyday basis, is just huge amounts of underinsurance. So evaluation is an informed opinion based upon many years of experience and formal training in a specialist area of knowledge. So what we pride ourselves on here at Dallas are the specialists that we have in very, very specific sectors, and we send the right person to the job. We won't just send one person to go and do an entire house if they've got fine art, if they've got very good jewelry, if they've got very good watches, if they've got ceramics, if they've got furniture. We will send the right person to do the job.
One hopes, indeed. I mean, it's all about specialist skills. I mean, I fully agree with you. I mean, there's no point in sending a generalist. I mean, I have the utmost respect for generalists, but you have to send specific specialists for specific jobs just to get the sort of the maximum benefit out of the valuation.
Absolutely. So when we complete a valuation, we're not only valuing the assets within the home, we're looking at the client and understanding their lifestyle. And we'll come to this a little bit more later, but it's so important when you look at the client. When I go into a property, the first thing I will do is I won't, actually look at the items. I'll chat with the client, work out who they are, work out what their lifestyle dictates, and work out where they would buy things. I'm sure in the art market, it's exactly the same, Ben, in terms of where somebody buys something is often reflective in the price that they pay for it. They may pay for it somewhere else.
As with many things, it's the person it's the person that you're insuring as much as the object. I mean, you can buy, let's say, just a basic print of a generic print. You can buy it in Harrods, or you can buy it in a small country gallery. Harrods clearly will have a premium, So if the client is somebody who will replace in Harrods or shops in Harrods or equivalent stores, you have to take that into account. I mean, I sometimes think that people don't understand that there's multiple values for the same item. I mean, it's within a spectrum, of course, but you have to. Certain people are more price sensitive. Other people are their wallets don't matter, so therefore they'll purchase in certain environments which tend to be more affluent and more expensive. So you have to take that into account when you're talking to the client, when you're putting a figure on their collection.
This is really one of the main reasons that I've always been a massive advocate of actually getting out there and meeting the client as well.
100%.
And whilst with watches, which are the only items that we actually do as desktop valuations as a general rule, the market is such that it dictates that it doesn't matter who you are and where you buy it from, the prices are pretty much the same. But in terms of doing valuations all from desktops, it's a farce, isn't it? Because you cannot do it without knowing the client and their spending habits.
Don't you find also? I mean, I know in my area. I mean, it's not. I mean, there were clearly there were exceptions, but when you go into a house, a collection tends to be homogenous, not in the taste, but in the sort of everybody has a comfort zone, both in terms of the levels at which they spend at, but also where they buy. So you can get a judgment, and a sofa is a sofa, but a sofa is not a sofa. It's going from 500 quid to £10,000. It'll look the same, but you'll get a pretty good judge if you go into the house, talk to the client, and then everything in that house will tend to have come from a similar environment, and therefore you get a gauge.
I mean, I have clients who buy sofas from Hermes for £100,000, Ben. So it's that puts it in context as to how different things can be.
Excuse me for being cheap.
So, the 8 problems with asset valuation clients may not realize. So, as we've just spoken about, are you valuing the items or are you valuing your client? It's just, as we've been speaking about, it's such a vital part of taking care of your client, really. So is the client underinsured? Now, if we're looking at, and I've been dealing with somebody today talking about inflation and the way that things are becoming more and more expensive every day. If your client hasn't had a valuation in the last few years, it's almost inevitable that they are going to be underinsured if they were correctly insured in the first place a few years ago, because the cost of just general items such as carpets, curtains, sofas, maybe not even £100,000 sofas, but even the lower level things such as £10,000 sofas have probably gone up from being £5,000 or £6,000 sofas 10 years ago. So the rate of inflation and also the cost of materials, the cost of labor, everything has increased so much. So you need to be sure that your client isn't underinsured. So does the client have proof of ownership? And not a lot of people actually talk about this, but if you have a client and the insurer comes back and says, okay, well, we've had this claim come in, let's see the receipts, let's see everything else, and the broker hasn't been to see the house and a valuer hasn't been to see the house, how does anyone know that these items even existed? And that's
one of the main reasons that we prefer not to do desktop valuations on large properties or large collections.
Exactly,
we want to go and see them.
We go in, yeah.
And if we don't actually see them, we will always caveat and point out that we haven't, just so there's clarity on that. I mean, it's a very important point.
Exactly, and it's such a great kind of peace of mind thing, I think, for clients, the fact that they know, should this happen and when the loss adjuster gets involved, it's been seen, it's been valued, it's on the property, and it's a vital part of the service, I think, that brokers should offer to their clients. So is the valuation correct? And I suppose this, for the most part, is the most important part if they have had a previous valuation done. Is it right? Were the paintings done by a painting specialist? Was the furniture done by a furniture specialist? Was the jewelry done by a jewelry specialist? And all these items really, really do mount up. You'd be surprised how many valuations we see, and I've seen some absolutely shocking ones, where they sent in a furniture specialist to do a silver collection, and you can tell by the way it's been written. So all the furniture is beautifully laid out and fantastic, talking about different woods, different grains and different types of legs, and then it comes to the silver and it's a spoon, and that's about as much as the description as you will get, and that is so important when you're looking at a correct valuation.
Can I just say also, even within the specialist area, paintings, furniture, whatever, certain collections demand a higher level of specialization than a sort of a bog standard valuation, if you know what I mean. There, there are artists that are very niche, or that, I'm talking from my point of view, or are so super contemporary and hot that their market is unto themselves. And if you get a valuer who, quite frankly, is used to valuing much, how do I say this politely, much more generalist collections, they'll find that difficult. They might not even understand, that they're effectively, there's a minefield that they're going into. Photography in particular is an area where huge mistakes can happen if you don't have a photography specialist. In addition, a vintage 1940s print has a vastly different value to the same print if it's edition printed in 1990.
Absolutely.
With the artist's approval, etc. But the price point is huge. The difference, and if you're not aware of that, and the specialist who goes in isn't aware of that sort of problem, you need to get the right specialism.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So, and this is one of my major bugbears. The next part of this: does the client have the insured items in the right categories? I get to see, and this is the majority of situations that I get to see, this is on walkthrough validations. I'll go to a client's house, and for those of you that don't know what a walkthrough validation is, please do get in contact and we'll have a chat with you about how the process of a walkthrough validation works. So I will get a call and we'll have a rundown of what the actual schedule is. And there'll be one big figure and it's in general contents. So there's nothing in paintings, nothing in ceramics, nothing in brittle, nothing in, so that we have all of these lovely categories that will all vary in premium depending on what they are, yet everything has been thrown into general contents. And that really frustrates me sometimes, because when you have it all in general contents, nothing is specific, nothing is specified. So if you have a fire, then how do you identify what was what and what was in each category? It's rather frustrating. Is the valuation in date? I mean, we'll come on to this in a minute, but you'd be surprised how many out-of-date valuations we see, and people are still working from them. And in many cases, you see ones from the mid-1990s when everything was booming, and people are still paying far too much, and still very overinsured. But on the flip side of that, you see more and more items now that are horrendously underinsured because people are still using valuations that they had from 10 years ago. And it is a really common thing. So what qualifications does the valuer have? Are they specialists in the right area? We've touched on this already, but you need to be sure of the person that is doing your valuation. What is their name? How is it listed on their valuation? If you get a valuation and it doesn't have the person's name that has done it, who has done it? That's the question that you have to ask. Who has done it? And why are they qualified to be able to do it? So, and a big point from our point of view, especially dealing with insurers, should something go wrong with the valuation, is the actual valuer insured? Now, Ben, you deal with paintings upwards of 7 figures. Now, how would you feel if you'd have had a valuation done by somebody that was insured only to the value of the cost of the valuation? It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's nonsense. I'm not sure whether people understand that what professional indemnity is. I mean, we have, what is our professional indemnity? £5 million, £5 million. £5 million, and that's not for the entire collection, that's on an individual item, and it's there to cover if, in our case, it would never happen, touch wood, but if a mistake is made and we give a wrong figure, and something happens, it's stolen, it's destroyed, and there's a claim, and we're proved to have, or the valuer is proved to have made a mistake, the insurance comes in and it will cover the difference, the shortfall. If a client has a valuation company, hires a valuation company that doesn't have the correct level of indemnity for the quality of the collection, then one hopes that there's never any problems, because if there is, it just will end badly. Professional indemnity is hugely important, and the higher the level, the more of the level of the collection, the more important it is.
So, as we're talking about, are you underinsured? Where have the values come from? So, again, on a lot of occasions, I'll go and see a client and I'll say to them, okay, this chest of drawers, for a bad example, but probably just as good as anything else. Where did the value from this come from? Oh, that's what I paid for it. And when did you buy it? Oh, it was 10 years ago. Right. Okay. So how do we think that is right? So was it the client that came up with the figures? Was it the broker? And it wouldn't be, again, the first time that we've gone in and a broker has been around a property, and they obviously have a generally good idea about what they think that their client should be insured for. However, it's still a bit of a finger in the air kind of scenario, unfortunately. And when you're playing with those kind of figures, especially with high net worth and ultra high net worth clients, do you really want to be taking a figure from putting a finger in the air and going, well, it seems going to be around there, somewhere like that? So again, this is one of the major things to point out, that in so many of these cases, people are dramatically underinsured. So back to the proof of ownership. Valuation report will completely solve that problem. When you get the valuation report, it shows where it is in the property, it shows that it's there, and it shows what it's worth, and it shows what you would have to pay to replace it. Not what somebody paid for it, not what somebody said it's worth, but what you would actually accurately have to pay to replace it.
And we've seen it. It's basically due diligence on your part. I mean, it's all taken care of. We've seen it. We can confirm that the ownership. Well, we can confirm it's in your house, and we, generally speaking, will again, depending on the level of collection, we will have access to the invoices, the purchase invoices, etc. So the document it unlocks all that. Absolutely.
And due diligence are the two words that are one of my favorite pair of words, really, because in the whole process of this, as a broker, you are showing due diligence to your client by suggesting that the valuation is performed, in order that you can provide them with a quality document that states that, you know, if you should suffer a loss, you are going to be accurately covered.
Absolutely.
So does the valuation cover the client's needs? So again, this comes back to pretty much what we're talking about in terms of, does it say where it was purchased, if it was bought in Harrods, or if it was bought in the local, I was going to say Tandy's, but I don't think Tandy's exists anymore, a local electrical goods store or something like that. And it doesn't make a big difference. And has the specialist got the correct credentials to do this? There are situations that we have come across, and we see it on numerous occasions, whereby somebody will be a specialist in a very specific area, and a very good specialist. But the problem is, when you get specialists becoming specialists in every area, then that's where you have problems. What will happen is they will say, okay, we'll take on the valuation. But at this point, they will ask other specialists to help them with it. And would you really want photos of paintings or pieces of furniture or pieces of jewelry being sent around to other people to make sure that the valuations are correct? Probably not. And your clients definitely wouldn't want that either. So having a team of people that is there, that are dedicated to their specific areas, and making sure that those are the right people that we send into the job, is vital.
And remember that also with the in-house team, they're covered by the insurance, they're covered with NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, all that sort of thing, which gives full protection for the client. I mean, if we ever need as a team to reach outside our specialist group, we will always notify the client. It rarely happens because we have a very tight team, but if so, we would always notify the client beforehand, because you know it's their confidential information, and one has to be very careful with that.
So when we talk about invalid credentials, and we've kind of touched on this a couple of times already, it's really important that people understand certification and items like this. So this is something that one of our jewelry specialists saw last year. So what it looks like to me, what it looks like probably to Ben, and what it looks like to probably most of you guys, is a GIA certificate that says this is this ruby, and this is the measurements of it. And we've looked at it, and it's all on here, and there's a lovely GIA stamp at the bottom that says this person is perfectly well qualified to do this valuation. However, this is wrong. It's not a GIA certificate at all. The actual parts of it that say they're part of the GIA alumni, it's fake. And you see this more and more coming to market from maybe in the Far East. I think this one might have been from Thailand or somewhere like that. But people still believe that it's printed on a piece of paper, it's got a stamp on it, and it says GIA on it. They believe that this is completely right. I mean, do we get that much in art certificates, Ben?
Yes, we do. I mean, there's been a rise in authentication documentation in living contemporary artists. I mean, when I started out in the market, I mean, there were very few artists that authenticated. But currently now, I mean, most contemporary artists have some form of authentication, or they're controlled by a specific gallery who therefore handles authentication issues. I mean, classic example is Banksy. I mean, there were so many fakes that he brought out Pest Control, which is his certification service. Those are also being faked now. So, I mean, and unless you are, and they just in that particular case, they change the actual the look of the document every 5 years. If you're not, and that every 3 to 5 years, if you're not au fait with the process and the new documentation, you won't know that it's potentially fake. So, I mean, it's just eyes wide open. Everybody can be fooled potentially, but it's just the more experience you have, the greater chance you have of pointing out that these things are fake. I mean, there's money in things.
It's actually a really good example, Banksy, because we know people that bought Banksy's at low prices. I mean, comparatively low prices, let's say 5-10 grand, or possibly even less. And now looking at the market, not quite as strong as it was this time last year. However, it's still booming, isn't it? And for those people to have a proper valuation done to make them see and realize, hang on a second, we need to have this specified within our policy. And we also need to make sure it's right. And we also need to know everything about it, and whether that be with accreditation. But we look at all of those aspects, don't we?
But in the particular case of, let's say, Banksy, but there are other artists, if they bought it early on and they haven't gone through the process of getting certification, because sometimes certification comes in post-purchase. If they don't follow that process, technically they can't sell the piece. So it's that gray area of, is it actually a real work of art? I mean, it is. So, and you'll generally look at the purchase information, so you'll know that it's right. But then you could advise the client that it's in their best interest to go through the authentication process, get a certificate, because then it's a saleable, transactable asset. Until they do that, it's, in theory, it's a Banksy. But if they want to sell it on, they won't be able to. So it's not just authentication and the benefits that brings and the security that brings, but it's also it becomes a tradable item, and their asset can be sold if they need to. But if they don't have it, it's a moot point for them.
And this is why knowledge of certification is just as important as knowledge of a painting, or in this case, a ruby.
Yeah, fully agree.
So you would be surprised how many people I go to that really do honestly look at their valuation and think, okay, well, this was 30 years ago. However, surely it still has some relevance. And people don't think about this. And a really good example is 30 years ago or so, in auction houses, they were throwing away G-plan and Urkel furniture because nobody wanted it. Mid 20th century things were just not popular. Everyone was buying Georgian and Victorian furniture and thinking, this is great, it's a solid investment. Now the entire world has turned on its head. And
yeah,
the 1940s sideboard from Urkel, it's going to cost you a substantial amount more than a George IV breakfast table. And that's just the way it is. So we would always recommend, when we're looking at evaluation, contents and all other items are revalued every 3 years, jewelry every 2 years. And at the moment, the way the watch market is, and if you haven't watched any of my videos on the watch market, please do. The watch market is so ridiculous at the moment that things are changing on a daily basis. When new models get released, it's almost a case that they're worth twice the amount that they were even released at. It's ridiculous. So watches every year, and with some models, I would even go as far as to say every 6 months.
Exactly. We have relationships with a number of art finance, and within art, it's from watches, jewelry, paintings, whatever, companies that we basically do the valuations for, and then they give them the market value in which they loan against. I know in Banksy, in certain areas, which is the same as the watch arena, you know, people get valuations every 2 months on very hot items because they want to increase their loan value. So there are certain areas, and it's the understanding of the general market to understand which parts of your collection are potentially hotter than others. I mean, sometimes it doesn't make much difference, and every 2 years will be fine, but you should be aware what you've got, and a general valuation will give you that sort of future knowledge.
And it will highlight the areas
exactly.
that actually do need to have specialist attention paid on them. And that's always a fantastic thing to be able to do for a client, to say, okay, we've looked around the entire house. We think, we're in the right ballpark with figures. However, this is something we need to keep an eye on, and we will make sure that we keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
So here's a really, really good example of a couple of valuations that I have dealt with personally in the last few years. So the one on the left, lovely italic writing, which in the 90s seemed to be incredibly popular, and everyone thought, okay, if it's written in italics, it must be legitimate. And this one doesn't actually state who's done it. The description itself is, it leaves a fair amount to be desired. And the figure really doesn't represent what that would be worth today. But if you look in the bottom of when the actual valuation was done, it's 1997. So this was still being used as a valuation for something 25 years later. And people were still presuming that this was going to be worth £5,200. I'm not a jewelry specialist. I don't know what it was actually worth in the end, but I would envisage somewhere north of 25 grand if that is the way that it, most jewelry at the moment is going. On the right-hand side, again, one that is completely out of date, dated in the year 2000. Again, it's not a brilliant valuation, but to the same degree, it's not terrible. It's just the fact that the date is really, really bad on that. So 22 years out of date. So just to talk about us, what we do and how we go about it. So we were founded back in 2016 by Rachel Dare. For those of you who are on the call that don't know who Rachel Dare is, I'm surprised. However, I'm sure that if you get onto our mailing list, she'll be in contact, and we do talk about things like this quite a lot. I'm happy to talk with you and your clients at length about any of the problems that you experience. We've got 20 plus highly experienced specialists. As we were saying, we sell specialists. That's our reason for doing this, is that everyone that goes out to look at an item is qualified to do so. There's no guesswork here. It's all about the right person for the right item. From fine art to street art, from watches and jewelry, antique silverware, clocks, rugs, tapestries, ceramics and glass, handbags, one of my personal favorites, as Ben will tell you, guns, wine, whiskey, classic cars. There is literally a specialist in our arsenal for all of these items. We're fully independent. Now, this is a really, really important factor. We do not sell items for clients. We do not buy items for clients. We are completely independent, and we just do valuations. That's it. We don't, that's exactly what we do.
We're not owned by an auction house. We don't have affiliations with an auction house, nor do we have affiliations with advisory firms who, by their very nature, buy and sell for clients. So we do one thing, valuations, hence the name, Dare Dallas Valuations.
Exactly. As we've spoken about, we have £5 million worth of professional indemnity insurance. We have a fantastically secure database. We're FSQS registered. We're a Spears 500 company. And we would advise anyone looking at valuation companies aside from ours to really do your due diligence when you are looking into these companies. Make sure they have got the indemnity that you need for your client. If you're dealing with an ultra high net worth client that has items that are 5 million quid's worth in value, you need to make sure that you are protecting your client with a valuation that is accurate, and make sure that they are known in the industry as well as we are, and that they have a secure database and all of the other items that we've been talking about. So when we do a quotation, we are always happy to speak to clients, always happy to speak to brokers. And the way in which we price things, again, is entirely dependent. It's an entirely bespoke service. So we need to speak to the client, work out who it is. I think one of the funniest things is, and Ben will probably corroborate this, is that when you go to a client and they go, they've got £5 million worth of art, it literally could be 1,000 paintings, or it could be one painting.
Yeah, it's not about the number, it's about the number of items. It takes as long to catalogue and value a £500 print as it does a £5 million painting. Clearly not quite, but I mean, it's time precious. So we need to know how many works of art as much as the value. We'll come up with the value. They don't need to give us the value. We'll do the valuing. We just need to know the number of items. Can I just say, just to go back for 1 second, going back to the fully independent side of things, the reason that's important is people's collections are their personal chattels, their assets, they're very private. If we were to have an association, as some valuation companies do, with auction houses, or if we have an active advisory wing to our company, you can't be sure that we are pricing for an independent valuation for retail replacement, or do we have an eye on a sale later? So we have none of that. There's no conflict. We value for the client's benefit rather than for any third-party benefit.
Absolutely. And if any of you who are brokers or authorized representatives out there want to get on a call with yourselves, or with you and your client even, we're happy to do that, to discuss what your client may need or what your client may want to look at in terms of valuations. We're always happy to talk, as you can probably tell from Ben and I today, always happy to chat about things and to make sure your clients get a valuation and make sure it's a right valuation. Please do, if you have the time, have a look at our website. We massively had a huge rejig of it over the last couple of years, and there's some fantastic information on there. There's all of our articles, which, if you haven't received our articles, get on our mailing list, because they are fantastically useful pieces and useful tools for a client. If you have a client that says, oh, I've got a collection by this artist or that artist, chances are, if they're of any decent kind of standing, we will have done an article about it. So get in touch, see if we've done an article, and you can talk to your clients and say, look, this is the market for this client at the moment. Do you really think it's about time that we actually had a look at it? But we do a new article every week. We also have a really large range of webinars that we've been putting out since, oh gosh, the first week of COVID, I think we started doing these. Gosh, that seems a long time ago now. But there are a lot of webinars that are out there that we're more than happy to share with you, and for you to share with your clients. And if there is a specific area that you feel we need to cover in order to convince your clients that a valuation is needed, or perhaps tell them, actually these paintings that you saw weren't worth a lot of money, are worth a lot of money, please do get in touch, and we're more than happy to have a look. But as I say, have a look at the website. It's full of really quite useful information. So don't like talking about charging, because you really, it's trying to talk about how we charge without speaking to a client is a very, very difficult thing. Our daily rate and our hourly rate really mean very little, because what we need to do is we need to speak with you and with the client and work out exactly what they need and work out exactly what type of service they need. It might just be a case that they need a general valuation across the vast majority of the contents. However, there are 10 pieces.
Hi guys, I think we're having a technical glitch here. I think we've lost Alastair, which might be a good time to wrap this up. I just want to thank you all for coming for the webinar. I hope you've learned something new. As Alastair said, if you have any queries, please give us a call. Look at our website, and we hope we can help you in the future. So guys, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you'll come on to our next webinar, and I hope you'll read the articles, etc. Thanks so much. Okay, bye-bye guys.